Welcome to this week's episode of Odours of the Odeon,
where we're going to be talking about
the 1992 Peter Jackson gore-fest that is Braindead.
On this week's episode, you can expect AIDS, Brexit, Jimmy Savile, Danny Dyer, and a whole lot more.
We'll also be talking to Jed Brophy, long-time collaborator with Peter Jackson, who's been in King Kong, the Lord of the Rings films, and also starred as Nori in the Hobbit films.
Sounds good.
Let's go.
You're now listening to Odours of the Odeon.
Do you think that bloke always talks like that?
Yeah, I think he does.
Yeah. Hello, obrigado, konnichiwa, you beautiful bastards, and welcome yet again to episode
number 13
of the Talk of Tinseltown, the Caliphate of Gutter Gossip, the investigative media choice for none other than Slick Nick Lyndhurst, and apparently, Aaron, the 13th most popular podcast in the North American film and entertainment category. Who knew?
I know, I saw that. Very good.
I didn't
Very
know.
good indeed.
I'm surprised.
It goes to show that we do have a loyal audience out there. And not just that, we've had some really interesting feedback from the last episode, which was on the 1986 B-movie classic Eliminators. And particularly the bad movie subreddit on Reddit has gone bananas. Do you want to hear some of the comments?
Yeah.
We had PM me your voodoo code, which is
That's a real name.
User PM me your voodoo code said, my dad had this VHS when I was a kid. I spent years trying to find it. Eventually got it in the collection. It wasn't as good as I remembered. We then had Macabre Jones say, I always got the feeling this movie was intended to be a TV pilot. Well, despite the conversation we had with Mr. Reynolds himself, Patrick Reynolds, who played Mandroid, this was very much a film. In fact, he almost...
Barely.
Yeah, almost invested his own money into that film as well. Luckily, he
got
didn't.
tucked up by the studio, didn't he?
And
Macabre Jones.
Yeah, Macabre Jones. And lastly, Phobos the Space Potato
Good kid.
said, I love this dumbass film.
Oh,
Which was very nice.
He's always been a good kid, Phobos the Space Potato, hasn't he?
He has indeed. I am fucking excited about this week.
Well, yeah, I hear on the grapevine, mate, that you've got an absolute horror show up your wizard sleeve, an absolute video nasty in your battered VHS case for the fans. What you got for me?
Well, I'm a lot more excited about this than you are.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about this, mate.
Both of us had to watch this film, and I actually watched it 4 times. We are going to be looking at taking a retrospective look at the 1992 Peter Jackson classic
Braindead. Why is there a goat noise in that?
Oh, it's a New Zealand film, isn't it? And they're notorious for their
Isn't it
sheep.
Isn't it
not
lambs?
Pretty sure it's a sheep, not a goat.
What are some lambs to the slaughter in this bad boy here? What's the film about?
Well, picture the scene. It's 1957.
The height of the Cold War.
A rat-monkey hybrid, known as the simian rattus, is pinched from a tiny Pacific landmass called Skull Island. The beast is then transported to Wellington Zoo in New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Meanwhile, a Spanish immigrant shopkeep named Paquita falls madly in love with a local boy called Lionel Cosgrove.
Fucking immigrants.
This is all foreshadowed by Paquita's tarot card reading mother.
Voodoo shit, huh?
What she didn't foresee was the controlling and overbearing nature of Lionel's mother, who is ever demanding and possessive of her only child. After an ill-fated first date at Wellington Zoo results in Lionel's spying mother being bit by the aforementioned rat monkey, the zombie free-for-all commences. A series of further infections produces one of the most comical, gory and disgusting zombie movies of the video nasty era. Imagine Gone with the Wind being brutally raped by an accident in an emergency ward. You're in the right ballpark.
Oh, it sounds like nothing's off limits in this.
Nothing is off limits in this early Peter Jackson bloodfest. Babies in blenders, sentient entrails, creamy pus shooting into the custard, only to be accidentally imbibed, and cinema's most ingenious use of a garden gnome. If you like rockabilly hair, the weaponization of lawnmowers, and someone literally being punched through the face, there's definitely only one movie for you, and that is Braindead.
I'll tell you what, man, this is a bit of a gore fest, isn't it? It's all a bit of blood and guts.
Yeah,
it was a bit rich for my blood.
It's really over the top. It's gratuitous in nature. It really is.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about the cast.
Who we got?
We've got Tim Balm playing Lionel Cosgrove. How would you describe Lionel's character?
Lionel is a sort of innocent, sheltered young man with a bit of an Oedipus complex, I would say, with a with an overbearing mum. Hello, mum. Who is... Well, actually, it's interesting because throughout the film, it's a bit of a coming of age kind of, rebirth for him. And I use the term rebirth very, very specifically, and we'll get more onto that later. But he goes from this sort of like weak character who's under the thumb of his mother to, I think, grown into a bit of a hero by the end of it. Man, I liked him. I think he's a cool character.
Yeah, and I remember in the scene with the tarot cards, he's presented to Paquita's character as a knight in shining armour who's going to come and save her, and he very much becomes that towards the end.
He's cool. When I first met him, I thought he was a bit of a bumbleclot, but he's all right. He's okay. He grows into the role.
It's worth noting as well that Lionel's character is living with the guilt of his father dying because from his memory, he fell into the ocean in a boat and his father jumped in to save him. Unfortunately, his father drowned. But
what a freak wave.
A freak wave, exactly, yeah.
That's right.
And how did you find the New Zealand accent in this? Because obviously it's like...
It's just so stupid.
The way they pronounce their vowels is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird. Do you know what? This film would actually be a lot genuinely scarier, I think, if it wasn't for the accent. I think it's the New Zealand accent almost like on its own that turns this into a bit of a comedy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know there's comedic bits to it, but yeah, man, that accent's so weird. I can't. It's a bit jarring on the ear, to be totally honest.
Well, in contrast to that was obviously Paquita's character, or Paquita Maria Sanchez.
Paquita Maria.
Who plays the love interest, who's basically an immigrant shopkeep, Spanish worker, whose mother, as we mentioned, sort of foreshadows the whole film through the tarot cards. Her accent is definitely not a New Zealand accent.
I don't know what that is.
But yeah,
I don't know how many immigrant Spanish shopkeepers there were in New Zealand in 1957, but I don't know what they were basing her accent on or like what kind of experience they had for that. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, she was a bit of a parody, wasn't she?
Yeah,
really?
totally.
But interestingly, this was the only English-speaking film she did. After this, she went back to her native Spain, and she acted in a few things. She was in a few TV dramas and a few TV series, but this was easily her biggest role.
To be honest, after Braindead, I'm surprised she didn't just go back and lie in the fetal position for several years and rock back and forth. It's fucking terrifying parts of it.
Oh, God. And then there's Vera Cosgrove, who's played by Elizabeth Moody, who is Lionel's mum.
Yeah, she's a right old cow. Good character, though.
Yeah, she's very necessary to the plot.
Yeah.
And obviously you mentioned before that she's
overpowering,
massively overpowering, overbearing, almost sort of matronly.
Yeah.
In a weird way, and she's become Lionel's become her life, where basically all she cares about is him.
Yeah.
And he's almost like a bit of a manservant to her, isn't he?
Yeah, you're right.
It's really gross.
He's a monkey butler to Dame Edna. That's what she looks like. She looks like Dame Edna. He's got more mummy issues than Gordon Bates, hasn't he, Lionel? It's problematic.
So what does Vera Cosgrove think of Lionel and Paquita's new love?
Well, let's hear from the matriarchal old bitch herself.
I thought you were a trustworthy boy, but going out behind my back with that oily shop girl, kissing and cuddling in public. But, Mum, she's experienced.
That's ridiculous. I mean, that's ridiculous.
She's experienced. When she says experienced, do you think she's referring to Paquita's acting at all? No, definitely not.
Definitely not.
She's oily. Quite casually racist there from old Vera, I'd say.
Where's that part of the world, isn't it?
Yeah, true. Okay, so we've got weak-minded Lionel, right? We have got his potential bit on the side, Paquita Maria. And then we've got that matriarchal, controlling, domineering, Thatcher-esque tart Vera. Who else is on the roll list?
Well, the only other notable mention on there is a guy called Jed Brophy, who actually is a guest on the show later on. He is. He took his time out to. He's going to take his time out to talk to us about his career. Now, he's had a very interesting career. He's been a long-time collaborator with Peter Jackson. He has worked on all of the Lord of the Rings film with him. He played Nori in the Hobbit films. He was in District 9. He was in King Kong. And he's also just done his own film project as well, which he's going to talk to us a bit about later.
Who's he in this film?
He is playing the lead zombie, who is a rockabilly sort of gang member called Void.
I love this character.
The first time we see him, he's actually pissing on Vera Cosgrove's
he
grave.
pisses on a grave, doesn't he?
But I mean, that's literally the extent of how far this film goes. I mean, there's someone pissing on a grave, which seems to be the ultimate insult.
Yeah, if you're going to piss on anyone's grave, it'd be that old bitches, though, to be totally honest.
Yeah, and I think other than Jed Brophy, none of them really went on to do anything else. This was probably the height of their success, I think. So we've got a experienced cast, some well-written, fascinating characters.
Great director, of a great track record.
Superb Oscar-nominated and winning director.
Yeah. a transnational cast as well.
Transnational cast.
There's a little bit for everyone. What really ties this film together? What really fucking pulls the room together, though?
Well, obviously, it is the weaponisation of garden tools. Now, this film is unique in that almost every single garden tool you can imagine is used as a weapon throughout this film.
Yeah.
Culminating in what is probably the most famous scene from this film and the one that's spoken about amongst horror film fans, which is the lawnmower scene at the end.
Oh, it's gruesome.
It's so grim.
Gruesome.
But again, that's foreshadowed in the film. But very early on, when Lionel's mowing the lawn, he's sort of tugging away at the lawnmower, and they make a point of doing this really cool shot, which is underneath the lawnmower, where it shows the blade spinning up of the lawnmower.
Yeah, it's a bit foreshadowing of what's going to come later, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I also really like the scene where his Uncle Les is using the shears,
Yeah.
which is, again, another garden tool, where he's basically shearing through about 50 or 60 zombies with blood shooting absolutely everywhere.
Oh, it's so gross. For people that haven't seen it, it's quite hard to actually articulate just while talking about it. Just the sheer extent of like how gory this film is. Like, didn't you say you knew something about the amount of blood that was used? Or
Yeah,
the amount of,
I think it broke a record. In the lawnmower scene, they used 30,000 litres of blood.
that's 4 Olympic swimming pools worth of blood. Is basically what you're saying that we used in this film. It's disgusting.
It's crazy.
Like, it's like, ugh.
It really is crazy. And another really cool scene is the bit where he basically
So grim.
he punches a zombie into a light, like a light bulb, light fixture, and the light fixture goes through the zombie's head, and then it lights up. And there's just this face, like translucent, shooting light out of it. And again, like a lot of this is tongue in cheek. It's very, very funny as well as being gruesome.
Yeah. It's not like it's more like, oh Jesus. I noticed as well, like quite consistently throughout the film, when they there's a few bits where people are getting like decapitated or semi-decapitated, and when their heads come off, I don't know how he's filmed it, but it looks like a hinge.
Yeah.
You notice that? It looks more like the head's like on a hinge that just like peels backwards.
That happens to the nurse, the second
That's
person
right.
who gets infected.
His
His mother bites a nurse, and then she rips the nurse's head off, and it's literally hanging.
It's hanging like,
hinge,
and the bit later where he's like, there's that gross bit when they're around the dinner table, and he's like, Lionel's trying to like politely keep this stupid little dinner party going, and he like pulls the hinge of the head back and pours the custard down the neck because she's got a slit throat.
I think he's scrambled egg. He's feeding her scrambled egg, and it starts pouring out the gap in her throat where her head has been sort of partially decapitated. And like you say, he just starts cleaning it off and putting it back down the hole.
Fucking sick.
It's really gross.
So we got the lawnmower man himself, Lionel. You mentioned the shears. What else?
There's also a rake. There's a rake going into the back
classic,
of...
isn't it?
Yeah, going into the back of... I think it's actually Void's head. They hit the rake in the back of the head.
Yeah.
But again, I think that the idea is that after this party, they get access to the shed, and then it's just using all the garden instruments and implements you can imagine to start destroying these zombies.
It's just a segue to get them to the shed so they can use all the tools to kill everyone, isn't it?
Yeah. Was there any scene in particular that jumped out as you as being the most disgusting?
All of it. well, mainly because it's literally about 45 minutes to an hour's worth of just non-stop blood and guts.
Yeah.
Like literally, it does not stop. There is no reprieve from it. It just goes on and on and on and on. There was one bit that I wanted to highlight though, which is not a it's not a garden tool as such, but I like it when Lionel pulls the porcelain duck off the wall.
Yeah.
You know, like those old like 1950s things you get where people have got like ducks on the wall, like something your nan would have or something like that. And he pulls one of them and he uses it like a ninja star and he throws it and it hits someone in the head, like their head splits open, shit like that. That's really cool. There's loads of really cool little bits like that. I think the most gruesome bit for me is when there's that sick, like evil baby thing that looks like something out of Spitting Image, and it's like falling into the blender, or it's about to fall into the blender. I could barely look at it, to be honest.
It's worth noting that baby was conceived by two zombies having sex, and I think this film was the first film to show like a pretty graphic sex scene between two zombies.
It's a zombie rape, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, yeah.
This film's a walking advert for abortion, isn't it? I mean,
really
it's like,
is, yeah.
fuck.
I think for me, the most disgusting scene was the bit where the pus oozes into the custard.
So gross.
Lionel's mum is sitting at the dinner table while she's sort of transitioning into a zombie, and she squeezes some pus out of her arm and shoots into one of the diner's custard, and the diner then proceeds to eat it. Meanwhile, her own ear falls off into the custard, and she eats the ear.
Swimming about.
Yeah.
Also, I think just as disgusting though as the blood and the pus going into the custard is the way the fat guy eats it. He's got that thing where he puts, you know, like when people put their lips around the whole spoon. You know, like that guy on MasterChef does, the fat guy, and he's like, like really like this elongated eating that's really unnecessary.
Yeah.
That makes me feel sick and squeamish anyway. Then you throw in like the fact that it's like this sort of pus-driven custards. Oh God,
nice and creamy.
Gross, so gross. Oh, I just remembered the garden tool bit. Right, there's one thing that we missed. Who is the self-styled king of the garden?
Oh, the garden gnome.
The garden gnome, the piece de resistance.
So
so good this bit.
It's really cool. So one of the zombies gets decapitated, and I think it's Uncle Les. Basically goes to hit the zombie with a garden gnome, but it embeds in the garden gnome's like a gap where the head used to be. So there's this body running around with a little garden gnome's head,
like a little pinhead.
It's really funny. And again, this is really common in this film. There's loads of little bits in it that are really, really humorous. And it was, that's how it was received when it was first released in New Zealand. That although this film is gruesome, it's fucking hilarious as well.
Yeah,
it really is funny.
It's cool, man. There's a lot of good, sort of equally gruesome, but I think more specifically like animatronics and like animation and prosthetics and things like that. That's really, really well done. Like there's the bit where it's like a half a head on the floor, like the bottom half of the head's missing, and it's like moving around, and it's so weird.
It's funny that the animatronics and the animation in this film, it gives you an insight into where Peter Jackson was moving as a director.
Right.
You consider like the amount of makeup, special effects, and prosthetics that took place in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and obviously the Hobbit trilogy as well. Is that you can see that given the right budget and being backed. Peter Jackson was always going to go on to make some really good films because he was so good. His imagination was so strong. He could take you on these journeys. But it's actually quite good. The prosthetics.
It's good, man. Yeah, it is good. It's good. I mean, no one can put a head in a blender quite like Peter Jackson. I think, as we've seen from this film.
One of my favourite bits and one of the best directed bits in terms of using that animation was when the entrails become alive.
Oh yeah, gross, and they're like following him. Yeah, did they follow him like through the sort of cat flap in the door?
Yeah, that's right. And it's like it's the arsehole as the mouth as well, and there's a bit where it actually farts as well. Yeah. And the little brown puff comes out.
Fucking gross.
It's really, really weird, but really well directed as well. And I think that's Void's entrails as well. So Void, the lead zombie, gets chipped away at during the course of the film, so he gets lessened and lessened and lessened and lessened.
That's right, and he just does that. Yeah, you're right. He becomes just like the top part of him is still him, isn't it? And then the bottom part's him with the entrails. And then I can't remember if it's Paquita or Lionel, but they put a toilet seat on his head. Yeah. They put a toilet seat on his head just to stop him from moving around. It's really good.
And he eventually dies by being consumed by the lawnmower as well.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to go.
There's a little, interestingly, so Peter Jackson was a massive fan of King Kong, and that's how he eventually went on to direct the film. In fact, he's sort of like a walking encyclopedia of the King Kong films. And I don't know if you noticed the little nod to King Kong at the beginning, but
the bit when they're on the island.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really King Kong. Like. Yeah.
And obviously, the island that King Kong's from is called Skull Island as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's where they find the rat monkey.
Yeah, very similar.
And it's no surprise that Jackson went on to eventually direct King Kong, although weirdly casting people like Jack Black in it, I thought was a bit strange.
Yeah.
In fact, I wasn't a massive fan of that film altogether.
I think the real surprise that Peter Jackson went on to have a career after this film, to be totally honest. Like,
when you look at his body of work up until this point, where it's like Meet the Feebles, Bad Taste. Bad Taste is almost worse than this in the sense that it's almost just a vehicle to show off his puppets.
Yeah.
And then obviously this film here, it's pretty remarkable that someone did back him with a massive budget.
I think like if you said to me at this point in 1992, what's this guy going to go on to do? I would have been like, maybe some snuff films, like parody porn, some fucking infomercials or something like that. Like, I don't think many of us expected the success that he saw in later days.
No, and he has become so synonymous with New Zealand now and brought so much industry and film and actors to the forefront who are from New Zealand. That you honestly can't mention Peter Jackson without mentioning the booming film industry that's happening in New Zealand at the moment. Can you think of any good films that have come out of New Zealand other than Braindead? I think you'd be surprised.
Go on.
Well, obviously there was the Piano, which was nominated for 8 Oscars and won 4 Oscars. That's
the old Joanna?
The old Joanna, yeah.
Which one's that?
That was the one with Harvey Keitel. Do Do you not remember it with
No,
the
I
piano
don't
on the
know.
beach?
I don't know. Is there any severed heads in it, or
There's
blood
no,
and
there's
gore
no
or
severed
anything like
heads in it,
that?
and Peter Jackson's.
Oh yeah, the
film.
piano, the old piano, the old
piano,
Joanna. Yeah.
Not to be confused with the Roman Polanski.
Yeah, that's the one I was
World
thinking
War
of, the
II film,
Polanski
The
one.
Pianist.
Yeah. That's a good film.
Have
That's
you
the follow-up, right?
That's the part
That's
two.
the sequel.
Yeah. Sequel to The
The
Piano.
piano, the sequel was The Pianist.
Also, there's a really good film that came out of New Zealand, which is about Maori culture and about sort of modern Maoris, which is called Once Were Warriors.
Oh, I've seen that, I think.
That's a very, very good film as well, which is quite harrowing, but a very good film. And I think there's a lot of these films coming out of New Zealand that are quite gritty and talk a lot about society in New Zealand. And that's one that's considered to be one of the best.
Who do you think would win in a fight between the harem of zombies in Braindead and the All Blacks? You know, when they do that hacker thing at the start?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's a good question, actually, because the All Blacks, I think, are the most successful sports team ever. So if anyone's going to beat them, it's going to be a group of zombies.
I think the zombies would roll them over, man. You'd be good night, sweetheart.
Speaking of friends of the show, we've got a very special guest joining us now.
We do indeed.
He is Nori in the Hobbit films. He's also in all the Lord of the Ring films, and he's been a lifelong collaborator of Peter Jackson. But more importantly, he's starring in this very film we're talking about today. He plays the lead rockabilly zombie known as Void. We are joined by none other than Mr. Jed Brophy himself. Hey Jed, well, thanks for joining us. Much appreciated. How you doing?
I'm really good, thank you, Aaron. How's the weather in your state of the world?
It's probably very different to yours. It's just moving into winter over here in the UK, so it's pissing with rain. Freezing cold.
I feel you, mate.
So you're joining us all the way from New Zealand. What's the weather like out there at the moment?
It's we've had quite a lot of flooding actually. We've had an unseasonable snowfall on the South Island and quite a lot of rain. But here, where I live on the Kapiti Coast, it's been pretty balmy.
Lucky thing, very lucky thing. Well, I suppose a good place to kick off, and I watched this film last night because it's one of my favourites, and I actually recommend any film fan to watch this film. The last time I saw you on my screen, you were donning a rockabilly haircut and you were being sucked into a toilet. And obviously I'm talking about Braindead, in which you played the character of a Void, which is such an incredible film. I suppose I wanted to just learn a little bit more about that from the beginning. How did that opportunity present itself to you?
Well, in I think 1989 or 1990, I had an agent. I'd graduated drama school and had an agent, and an audition came through for the part of Lionel actually. But I didn't know, I hadn't seen Peter Jackson's films at that stage. I hadn't caught up on Bad Taste. I think I'd seen Meet the Feebles, but I'd never met him. And that project fell through for a couple of years because one thing or another, I think actually one of the producers from Senator Films might have absconded with some of the money. The way Peter tells the story. 2 years later, they rewrote the script and set it in the 50s. And I was doing a play at a theatre in Wellington, written by one of the co-writers, Stephen Sinclair, of Braindead. And he suggested to Peter that he come and see the play and see me for the part of Void. So I kind of got the part by proxy, really. I think someone pulled out. And they offered me the part of this lead zombie, and I said yeah. And I'd sort of forgotten about my original audition as Lionel. It wasn't until we were shooting that I went, oh yeah, that's that film.
One thing I've always been interested to know, because this film came out right after the sort of video nasty era, and I don't know what it was like in New Zealand, but in the UK, a lot of those films got banned. Now, when you put those films in comparison to Braindead, I mean, that film is another level in the amount of gore, amount of blood that occurs in that film. It must have been so much fun to make.
It was, and you know, it was not an effort to go to work every day. I literally loved going to work on that job. I was able to drive over the Paikakariki Hill from where I was living on the coast and be there in half an hour. And so it was a nice close job, but everything was practical. There were no CGI effects in that. I think the entire special effects budget wouldn't have even paid for coffee on Lord of the Rings. It was really just Richard and Tanya and Bill and maybe two other people working at Weta, and they were making all of the effects and props and puppets and everything out of the back of Richard and Tanya's house at that stage. That was pre-Weta having a workshop. I've never done prosthetics before. I'd not had lenses put in my eyes. my stunt double wouldn't shave up his moustache, so I ended up doing my own stunts on the film, which was, most of the stunts, which was pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing to do. But yeah, getting to work with Peter's genius and watching the way that he puts together scenes and the humour that he brought to it is actually still my favourite filming experience, probably.
Wow, that doesn't surprise me. And I suppose with Peter in general, I suppose what he was showing there is the promise that he has with films. And when given a larger budget, you really see what he can do. Because obviously you've worked with him on most of his films, particularly most of the films that have gone on to be very, very successful. You were in all the Lord of the Rings films, you were in District 9, you're obviously in King Kong, and then you played Nori in all the Hobbit films. So you've obviously built up quite a special relationship over the years, I assume.
Look, I feel very, very privileged to have met him when he was starting out in his film career, really, and I've always stepped up and done as good a job as I can for him. I'm pretty loyal to him too, in terms of, I support what he does 100% because of what he's done for the film industry here, and I've been lucky enough to be a part of that. A lot of it's location. I live not very far away from where the studio is, but it's also that thing of Peter's very loyal to people who front up and give him 100%. He really values the people that work for him, and that's why I like working for him. He's an honest boss. He's very respectful, but he's a genius, and part of his genius is surrounding himself with people who are very, very good at what they do. I know that he won't mind me saying this, but I know that he feels the loss of Andrew Lesney, his cinematographer, very much, because they were such kindred spirits. And it's a mark of him as a filmmaker that he manages to keep good people around him wanting to work for him. He's a funny guy, he's a naughty guy, and so you have a lot of fun on set. There's not a lot of reverence on a Peter Jackson set. He's reverential of the material and what he's trying to achieve for his fans, but he also does it in a kind of rock and roll way, which we love.
And it's interesting because there's an argument that Peter Jackson's put New Zealand on the map from a film perspective, but actually when you look into it, New Zealand has been producing some incredible films over the years. I mean, obviously The Piano was nominated for 8 Oscars, and I think it won 4. Whale Rider, Black Sheep. I mean, Once Were Warriors is a fantastic film. New Zealand just seems to keep producing incredible films and incredible filmmakers as well.
You have to do more than one thing in New Zealand to be working in the film industry. So a lot of people who start out as editors or as runners end up making their own films, and there's not a lot of money. There's only one funding body, and it's all funded by 4 million taxpayers, so it's not a huge amount of money to make films with, and that creates a kind of inventiveness and innovation when it comes to technology and writing. That we're very different in terms of where our soul is as an arts industry. It gets quite a dark underbelly in New Zealand, and that creates a kind of a dark humour, which is very different to any other country. And I think it's our uniqueness and our isolation that lends itself to making those kind of films. And we also don't like to be told how to do things. Kiwis have a way of doing things which is very unique to us, and we're very bloody minded. We're a stubborn race, and we just we follow things through and get it done. Like Blue Moon, it's a film we wanted to talk about a bit later on, but that sort of came out of that inventiveness of working with people like Peter. Mark and I working with Peter quite a lot, and we liked working with each other and said, well, let's just make a film. Let's just make a simple film with this guy, Steph Harris. Let's just do it like old school, like it was back in the day when we started.
Let's spend a bit more time talking about Blue Moon, because this is very interesting. This is a film that you're currently running through the festival circuit. Tell us a bit more about that film and how it came about and the project in general, really.
There's a writer called Steph Harris who lives in the South Island. He's a policeman, but he's written 6 films, one of which the Waimate Conspiracy won a film award here in 2006 for his writing. Mark had worked with him a bit, and Mark Hadlow and I have obviously worked a lot together over the 33 or 34 years that we've known each other in both theatre and film. And having spent 227 days, I think, sitting in the chair next to Mark and working alongside him as his brother on The Hobbit, we got to know each other pretty well and really wanted to do a film together. And Steph and he and I had been working on a film called Swan Song for about 2 years. We'd done a teaser trailer and a proof of concept bit of filming for the Film Commission, had a script with them. It was taking a long time. It was 2 years and we still hadn't shot anything. And Mark said to Steph, why don't we just shoot something we can shoot on a bloody iPhone? And it pretty much came out of that. And in 7 or 8 days, Steph had written a script and sent it to both Mark and I read it and went, wow, this is a film I really want to do. It's basically a two-hander. The premise is it's a guy running a 24-hour service station in a very small town, Mark Hadlow's character, and it's really boring. No one comes in, and then 2 visitors arrive, one before me and then me, and that changes the course of his life forever. And it's a crime thriller. It's basically he plays a guy and I play a guy that had gone to school with him that is now a gangster, and it's a standoff in a BP. And we shot it in 30 hours. Shot a 95-minute film in 30 hours on an iPhone with the same Moondog anamorphic lens that Soderbergh used making his latest film on an iPhone. So,
oh wow,
yeah, and it got into the international festival here in New Zealand. We submitted it, and then the Film Commission gave us finishing money to finish it, to do the sound and the grading and the final print. And we've just finished 14 centres all around New Zealand, taking it to the provinces and to the cities and trying to get on the international festival circuit.
What New Zealand seems to have done is that you guys have gone about making some really good, rich films that will work in any cinema because they're just great stories, right? And that seems almost unique to New Zealand. It's not something you see like in other English-speaking countries that aren't the UK and the US.
Yeah, I agree with that up to a point. I think the problem is that a lot of the films that we make here don't get seen outside, so you get to see the really, really good ones. But yeah, we are lucky. If you have a look at something like Flight of the Conchords, they were told by the funding bodies here in New Zealand that they would never make it overseas. I think everyone was as surprised as they were what a kind of an international following they got. But that kind of humour is universal. Those guys have touched on something that you can all laugh at. Same with What We Do in the Shadows, same with Black Sheep. It has that dark humour that international audiences really like. If you look at the likes of the TV series Fargo, it's pretty dark humour, but it's really watchable. And I think that we're more affected by dark British humour and dark American humour than we are by our neighbours across the ditch. We don't tend to make films like Australia because they're kind of too close, if you know what I'm. They're our nearest neighbour, and we have a huge rivalry with Australia in sport and in arts. And I think we sort of shy away from trying to do those kind of films. Having said that, I think there's room here to do a Western or two. I think we have the landscape for it, and it's always been mind-boggling to me that we don't have a Western TV series or something like that shooting here in New Zealand. I think we could do that quite well too.
I think you guys have got the landscape for everything, right? I mean, you've got a real mixture of pretty much everything. I can see why so many of those films are shot there for the simple fact that it's got such rich surroundings that you can pretty much get mind-blowing shots that sometimes you don't even realise that they're on Earth, some of these shots. It's crazy.
It's all built by Weta, mate. It's all built by Weta Workshop. None of it's real.
Well, that kind of actually brings us really nicely back to Braindead with the humour side of things, because I just want to ask this as a last question, because I found this really fascinating, is that if you describe Braindead to someone, basically it's got, a rat raping a monkey, you've got, you've got like a zombie sex scene, there's like a brutal ending with the lawnmower. But obviously it's deeply infused with humour. It's incredibly funny. Now, what I find interesting is that marketing a film like that must have been difficult. And how was it actually received in New Zealand when it came out?
With that, it was an R16 here, so it had a restricted rating on it because of the amount of blood. And I think I may be wrong about this, but I was told last year or the year before that it still has the Guinness Book of Records for the most blood ever used in a film. And in fact, the 10-minute lawnmower scene that you were talking about was banned in some countries, Germany especially. And I think because Tim Baum and I travelled to Germany to a couple of horror conventions, and they weren't actually allowed to show it. So you can own it, you can rent it, you're allowed to show it in your home, but I don't think you can play it publicly as a full movie still over there. I think it still is banned. Here, it went down really well because Meet the Feebles and Bad Taste had already become kind of cult classics. But it wasn't until it played at Cannes and had this kind of amazing showing in Rome and places like that, sort of got a cult following overseas, that people in New Zealand really started to take us and him seriously, I think.
Well, thanks, Jed. It's been a real pleasure, and keep in touch.
Thank you very much, Aaron.
Oh, man, he was a really nice bloke. Really nice guy.
Good kid.
Actually, he told us a couple of stories off mic, which I found quite interesting. we spoke a little bit about how Braindead and Shaun of the Dead have a lot in common. And he said that he once met Nick Frost, Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright at a Comic-Con, and they sort of like approached him giddy like schoolboys, saying how they loved him so much and he was their favourite zombie of all time.
I think he might be my favourite zombie, actually. He's pretty good.
He's definitely up there.
Who's yours?
I think the black guy chained up in the back garden in 28 Days Later, who's sort of frothing at the mouth. He's my favourite zombie of all time.
He's a good zombie, man.
What about
He's
you?
a good zombie. I like the mum in Shaun of the Dead when his mum gets bit, and she's like still got like the sort of the politeness of a like middle class suburban mum, but she's becoming a zombie. It's quite cool.
She's got like a little tissue tucked up her sleeve that she's been using.
Bless her.
Also, he also told a great story about during the shooting of The Hobbit as well. Apparently, Peter Jackson put on all three of the films, Meet the Feebles, Bad Taste, and Braindead, and Martin Friedman and the crew were sitting there watching those three films, which I found very funny to think that that's going on behind the scenes.
I'd be quite worried if I was on set and the director then showed me, hey mate, these are the previous films I've made.
Here's my back catalogue of films.
I think I might
Slightly
walk off.
narcissistic.
No, more about the quality, mate.
Yeah, exactly. What have I got myself into? So, there's obviously some themes running in this film.
It's not just a zombie film.
No, I don't think so.
I think there's a lot going on.
A real subtext to this movie.
A lot of different subjects. You've got a bit of theory, haven't you,
I
to get started on this?
I do, actually, yeah. I think, when you consider that this is basically a disease that was started by monkeys,
Yeah,
it's blood-to-blood infection,
it is. Passed on very quickly.
and it's ravishing the population.
It really is.
I think this is a film about AIDS. I do. I really do. I think that this is a witty,
I'm listening.
witty, dramatic look at the AIDS epidemic. And I almost think that, Australia and New Zealand are renowned for the way that they controlled the disease over there and they educated their people. I actually think this might be a partially government-funded warning video on the dangers of AIDS. Absolutely.
You reckon it's a health and safety video for HIV?
I do. I really do, yeah. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, that will put me off AIDS and sex and custard forever.
Positively.
What about you?
I agree. Well, yeah, that's an interesting theory. I mean, I think we're maybe 20 minutes in the film from Farouk Balzara and Rock Hudson turning up. You know what I mean? Some like Magic Johnson doing the catering or something like that. There's definitely some context there. I think it might also be a bit of a forewarning on Brexit from Peter Jackson 20 odd years ago, right? So hear me out here. Okay. I think there's a bit of a view here on a sort of what a post-apocalyptic, post-Brexit Britain might look like in a few years' time, given the state that we're currently in. Starts with a rash decision, right, which is largely made out of self-interest by the geezer in Sumatra, who steals the old rat monkey. What's it called? The Ratticus finch. Ratticus finch. And then quickly escalates to a zombie apocalypse where people are fighting over custard and rakes, which I think is probably what the UK is looking at over the next 10, 15, 20 years. I don't know, man. What do you think?
I think it would be incredible foresight from Peter Jackson to have predicted Brexit 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But yeah, there's definitely some of those themes.
Well, the only hole in this theory is, of course, that in the convoluted reality of the modern-day customs union, the laissez-faire administrative errors and shortcuts in getting the rat monkey out of Skull Island would never have been tolerated. So I don't think it would have got through today.
No, that's true.
There's also the issue of Paquita. She's an immigrant. Would she have made it into this? Visa immigrant
issues,
major immigrant issues, freedom of movement, you know. So I think there's maybe some links there, but maybe they're a little bit tenuous, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anything else?
Religion and the occult is one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because there's quite a lot going on in that respect.
I think that actually does make sense.
That's fair, yeah.
What are the totems that you've seen in that?
Well, let's think about this. You've got, right at the start of the film, when they're on Skull Island, you've got the sort of voodoo type cats, the local indigenous tribes, which they've deliberately positioned as being a bit sort of shaman-like.
Yeah.
It felt anyway. You've then got the tarot cards that the old mum's reading, Paquita's mum. By the way, did you think she looked a little bit like Karl Lagerfeld, her mum?
She did.
She did, didn't she?
She did, yeah.
She probably had the Lagerfelds about her.
Behaved a bit like him as well.
Yeah, and he's always been quite a sort of, ethereal, spiritual type character.
I definitely think he dabbles in the occult.
100%, mate, 100%. So, yeah, there's the tarot cards, there's the sort of the shaman guys at the start of it. Yeah, I think there's a few different things going on. There's the priest, of course, who is like a kung fu fighting priest who looks like he's got a bit of the Father Ted's on acid about him, isn't he?
Yeah, he's
a bit Father Ted, a bit Billy Idol, I thought, when I saw him. So
well, he actually is the one that commits the rape on the nurse when they're both zombies, which there's some obviously underlying irony in that.
Probably Catholic then, isn't he? So yeah, man, there's a few bits. What did you think about the religious side of it?
Yeah, obviously you're forgetting the pendant as well, right? So Paquita's mum gives Lionel a pendant, which is the star and moon shape, which he eventually uses to overcome the evil. So yeah, there's definitely some undertones of the occult. And
one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about, the Oedipal relationship,
yes,
right, between good old Lionel and that old bat Vera. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a couple of really interesting things in there. Where obviously there's several times in the film where he rejects the love of Paquita because he doesn't have room in his life for both his mother and her. But I think the most obvious bit of iconism was where he literally goes back to the womb, where his mother's vagina and stomach open up at the end when she becomes that huge, grotesque monster, and he goes back to the womb. And it's always been a bit of a dream of mine to sit there in symbiotic fluids back in the nice warm...
That's where you're most comfortable, isn't it?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Didn't you fill a bath full of symbiotic fluid once and just sit in it for a week?
I did, yeah. I did. It's where I'm at my most comfortable.
Kinky fucker. Yeah, it's interesting. The rebirth's kind of cool, actually, because it's also of him, I feel like it's him coming of age. He sort of gets a bit heroic then. He throws off the shackles of his mother, and obviously it gives him the opportunity to then shack up with old Paquita as well.
Yeah, it's a proper fucked up relationship he's got with his mum.
It's a weird one. It's a proper Oedipal thing, isn't it?
Yeah, proper Oedipal thing.
Where would you say Lionel and Vera's relationship stacks up against some of the big Oedipal complexes in history?
Well, I mean, it's going to have to be a scale, right? So, number one, I assume, is Oedipus himself.
Yeah, man, he's the poster boy of it, really.
Okay, so what's the other end of the scale?
Well, I don't know about the other end of the scale, but I was thinking, like, you got Jimmy Savile.
Oh,
he had a weird one with his mum.
Very odd relationship with his mum.
I think he used to call her. Yeah, I think he used to call her like the Duchess.
Yeah.
And like, did he used to live in the same, or he kept her in some fucking caravan? No, I'm dead serious.
He basically, she had a house in Leeds.
That was it.
And he kept the house exactly as it were.
That's
and he used to go and get her clothes dry cleaned every week as if she was still
That's
alive,
right.
basically.
Yeah.
Very odd.
Yeah, creepy fucker. Who didn't see that one coming?
Yeah.
Norman Bates is another obvious one.
Yeah, another cinematic sort of pussy-whipped mother's boy.
Prince Charles and the Queen.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah.
So I think that's lessened over the years, but yeah, it's definitely a...
What about Cristiano Ronaldo and his mum? Whenever I see him and his weird old mum and he's like holding hands and bringing her to the signings and stuff, I always think that's a bit of a weird one.
I think a lot of these sportsmen, they've basically been dragged out of school at a very young age.
Yeah.
They've never been given an opportunity to grow up and to have the experiences that most normal people have. I think his mum still holds his hand while he crosses the road or some shit.
Mama's boy in it, man. I don't like it.
Greasy head mama's boy.
It's basically the Lionel Cosgrove of the Champions League.
Mama's boy.
Anyway, Lionel is definitely of that ilk. It's somewhere in there.
Yeah, I'd say he's between a Savile and a Ronaldo.
He's somewhere in the Savile and a Ronaldo, yeah. I would agree with that.
In fact, have we mentioned Jimmy Savile in every single bit of media that we've done? Jimmy Savile's come up.
He's a relatively common theme, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so what we're saying then is this is a quasi-governmental funded AIDS health and safety video backed by the Catholic Church with a respectful nod to the Oedipal history of Messrs Savile and Prince Charles, with Karl Lagerfeld doing the outfits.
I think that's exactly what we're saying.
Who on earth, who in their right mind, would guess that film from a few clues?
Let's find out.
Can the UK DVD reseller guess the movie from the description of the week?
Cambridge Abbey speaking. How can I help?
Oh, hi there. I wonder if you can. I'm looking for a DVD. Only problem is I don't actually know the name of the DVD.
Okay, that's okay. Do you know anything about it?
I do, yeah, I do.
Okay.
It's set in New Zealand,
Okay.
and I think it takes place in the 1950s. And
Okay.
and it's a zombie film.
Okay. Right, let me have a think. Is it an old film or is it quite a new film?
It's from the 1990s, and I think it was directed by do you know that he used to be quite a fat man, but now he's quite skinny, and he did the Lord of the Rings films. He
Peter
did.
Jackson.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one. Yeah, it was. I think it was directed by him.
Okay, let me have a look. I've written into Google 90s zombie film Peter Jackson, and I'll see if anything comes up.
Okay, great.
Is it called Braindead?
Yes, that's the one. Brain. She's done well.
Ooh.
She did very well indeed.
That girl knows her zombies from her Abercrombies, doesn't she?
She does indeed.
Good kid.
So, if you have any theories on the subtext of this film or any Peter Jackson film, hit us up on Twitter, Odours_Odeon. Come follow us on Facebook, Odours of the Odeon, or even drop by the site, odoursoftheodeon.com. And remember to subscribe, rate, download this podcast.
Yeah, bring the custard, kids.
Bring the custard. So, it's 2018.
Yeah.
London is being ravaged by zombies.
Yeah.
And you need to remake Braindead.
Damn.
Who are you going to pick as the
Who's
cast?
going into the cast?
Absolutely.
Who's going to be in there? I'm interested to get your thoughts on this, mate. I've got a couple of ideas about who would work well in this particular remake. So, as is always the case with us, I wouldn't change the script at all. I'd keep it as is, right? The gallons of blood, the full nonsense that goes through this. How do you feel about a Danny Dyer in the lead role as a Lionel? That working for you?
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah?
I like that a lot. I mean, you'd have to change the script because the words slag and mug.
You fucking slag that, you slag, you mug. But I think it'd be quite good. I think it'd be quite cool. I think as the mum, this is a bit of a curveball. I had two ideas for this. I think it'd be quite good to get a proper Thess, but in drag to do the mum, like a Bill Murray or someone like that. I think he'd be really good. Or I thought she looked a little bit like David Davis, the politician. So I thought if he's got a bit of time freed up, which I think he does at the moment, then maybe we could pull him into it. I think it'd be good.
So does this mean that it would be set in the East End of London or the
Yeah.
fictional borough of Walford?
Yeah, but it's not fictional, mate. Wolford's a real place. Wolford's a real place in your mind. It would be. And then the final person that we need to cast is Paquita. Right?
Yes.
So we need someone here who is dedicated to a cause with a little bit of love in her heart. What are your thoughts on a Deirdre Rashid?
Oh, yes.
You know what I'm saying?
I like that a lot. And again, dipping into the UK soap circuit as well.
You know I like to tip into the panto circuit, the soap circuit.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty robust cast.
There's
And
a
I
lot of
think-
tools ready for us.
I think it's also a very low budget cast as well, so I don't think you'd have to necessarily spend big dollars on getting that cast together.
Talk for yourself, mate. I'll be going big on this one.
Well, that's it for this week. I want to thank our special guest, Jed Brophy, and I also want to thank Abby at FOP in Cambridge, who took part in our Guess the Movie from the Clues. We have been Odours of the Odeon.
And until next time, mother lovers, don't forget.
Don't you touch her! No one will ever love you like your mother.
You've been listening to Odours of the Odeon. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Odours of the Odeon.